Right now, I mean, as we speak, speculative markets are pricing an invisible product. A product that occasionally hallucinates and writes bad poetry, by the way, at $1.2 trillion.
Yeah. Let that sink in for a second.
Right,
Right. Yeah.
1.2 trillion. And we're basically watching an entirely new sector of the global economy being built in real time. And the numbers, they are just completely detaching from anything resembling traditional software evaluation. So today, we're figuring out why.
And, we should probably clarify right off the bat that the 1.2 trillion number, it sounds absurd on the surface. But we have to be really clear to you listening. This is an implied pre-IPO market proxy based on on-chain trading.
Right, right.
It is not an official company valuation. But even as a market signal, it makes perfect sense when you look at the underlying mechanics of what is actually being sold. Because the market isn't pricing a chatbot.
No, definitely not.
It's pricing the underlying infrastructure of human cognitive labor. And if you look at history, the companies that successfully standardize and, build the infrastructure for a wildly unpredictable new resource, they don't just become valuable, they become the operating layer of civilization.
And that is exactly what we're unpacking today. Welcome to this deep dive. We have a massive stack of sources to go through, exploring this crazy intersection of business history, physical infrastructure, and AI strategy. And before we dive into the deep end, a quick note. This deep dive is written and executive produced by Nye Andrews, Google AI professional and certified Anthropic AI fluency teacher.
So we're in good hands.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Our central thesis for this exploration, it's going to sound like a bit of a historical stretch at first, but stick with us here. Standard Oil sold standardized trust in energy. Anthropic is selling safety and reliability and intelligence.
It's a really profound historical parallel, honestly. We are essentially going to treat a modern artificial intelligence company the exact same way we would treat a 19th century industrial titan.
Have you ever wondered what it looks like when a technology transitions from just being this, neat experiment to being the actual infrastructure of the world? Because the parallels, the consolidation of a chaotic new market, the scramble for massive physical infrastructure, the sheer scale of capital, it's impossible to ignore.
It really is.
So I want to start with the chaos, because I don't think you can understand what Anthropic is trying to do with safe AI unless you really understand what an unregulated boom actually looks and feels like. We have to rewind to the 1850s and 1860s. Pennsylvania, the oil boom.
Yeah, it's the perfect baseline for this. So in 1859, a man named Edwin Drake drilled the first commercially successful oil well in Titusville, Pennsylvania. And almost overnight, you just had absolute unmitigated mayhem.
Like a gold rush.
Exactly like the gold rush, but honestly dirtier and way more volatile. You had thousands of prospectors just rushing into these rural valleys. There were no regulations, no environmental controls, no established supply chains.
I was reading in the sources that the mud in these boom towns was so deep that horses were literally sinking to their bellies.
Yeah, just horrific conditions.
Yeah.
And you had these teamsters, the guys who drove the horse-drawn wagons to transport the oil barrels, and they were charging extortionate, basically monopolistic rates just to move a barrel a few miles to a railhead.
It was complete chaos.
Yeah.
But what were people actually using this oil for back then? Because it wasn't for cars, obviously.
Right. No, the internal combustion engine wasn't really a factor yet. The primary product was kerosene. And kerosene was used for illumination.
For lamps.
Exactly. Up until that point, people were largely using whale oil to light their homes.
Which is crazy to think about.
Right, and whale oil was becoming incredibly expensive because whale populations were just being decimated. So kerosene, derived from crude oil, it offered this cheap, bright, really consistent light that effectively extended the working day and totally transformed domestic life.
But, and this is a massive but, the product itself was practically a lethal weapon. I was reading through the historical context in our sources, and the refining process back then was terrifying.
Oh, it was a literal coin toss whether your living room lamp would give you light or burn your house to the ground.
Wow.
Literally.
Yeah. So crude oil is this really complex mixture of different hydrocarbons, right?
Yep.
To get kerosene, you have to refine it. You essentially boil the crude oil so that the different compounds separate out based on their boiling points.
Okay, makes sense.
The problem was that early refiners were just sloppy. They were in a rush. They wouldn't properly extract the highly volatile compounds, specifically naphtha, which is essentially an early form of gasoline.
Oh, no. So people were buying what they thought was safe lamp oil.
And it was actually laced with raw gasoline.
That is horrifying.
Right, so you put that in a glass lamp, you light a wick, and as the glass heats up, that volatile naphtha turns into vapor. And one spark and the entire lamp detonates like a fragmentation grenade right in your kitchen.
Yeah. So the public was caught in this incredible psychological tension. They were mesmerized by the magic of this cheap, brilliant light, but they were deeply, deeply terrified of the technology. The market was completely fragmented. You had hundreds of wildcat drillers, amateur refiners, and the quality of the kerosene just varied wildly from barrel to barrel.
Okay, so enter John D. Rockefeller. He looks at this absolute mess, and he doesn't look at the drilling. He realizes drilling is this volatile boom and bust gamble. He looks at the refining.
Exactly. He sees the bottleneck.
Right. In 1870, he and his partner, Henry Flagler, they incorporate their business. And they don't call it fast oil or, I don't know, cheap illumination. They call it Standard Oil.
Which is just brilliant. The psychology of that name is incredible. Rockefeller recognized that in a market defined by literal explosions and extreme volatility, the most valuable commodity he could offer wasn't actually the oil itself.
It was psychological relief.
Yes. The name Standard Oil communicated reliability, consistency, and confidence to a terrified public. When a consumer saw that Standard Oil blue barrel, they knew it had been refined properly.
They knew the naphtha was out.
They knew their house wasn't going to burn down. Rockefeller did not just sell oil. He sold trust.
Rockefeller did not just sell oil. He sold trust. That is such a powerful line. Standard Oil was a branding masterclass before it became an antitrust case.
It really was.
And it worked on a scale that is almost hard to comprehend today. Our sources note that by 1880, Standard Oil controlled roughly 90 to 95% of all U.S. oil refining.
Yeah, near total control.
They brought this ruthless efficiency, pricing power, and industrial coordination to a market that just desperately needed someone to act as the adult in the room.
And now I want you to overlay that exact dynamic onto the present day. Look at the generative AI market over the last few years.
It's the 1860s kerosene market all over again.
It really is.
The parallels are eerie. Because think about it, we are all amazed by these large language models. They can write complex software code, they can draft legal briefs, synthesize years of medical research in seconds. It's the modern equivalent of that cheap, bright light extending human capability.
But the enterprise world, the government, the general public, they are simultaneously terrified of this technology blowing up in their faces.
And those digital explosions, they take many forms, right? We aren't talking about literal fires in the kitchen. We are talking about catastrophic hallucinations where an AI confidently invents legal precedents in a courtroom.
We've seen that happen.
Exactly. Or data leaks where proprietary enterprise code is suddenly regurgitated to a competitor. We're looking at the threat of rogue autonomous agents acting on their own, or models outputting deeply biased, legally actionable decisions. It is the Wild West.
So just as oil was the strategic commodity of the industrial age, artificial intelligence is becoming the new strategic commodity of the information economy. And this is exactly where Anthropic steps into the Rockefeller role. They are positioning themselves directly against the chaos of the AI boom.
Okay, so to understand how they are doing this, we need to unpack the sheer scale of what this new commodity actually is. Because it's not just a chatbot. Our sources include these massive, deeply philosophical essays from Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei.
Yeah, Machines of Loving Grace and The Adolescence of Technology.
Right, and he is fundamentally trying to redefine what we are building here. He isn't talking about a helpful assistant that drafts your emails. He defines powerful AI as essentially a country of geniuses in a data center.
A country of geniuses.
Let's break that down because it sounds like straight science fiction, but he's presenting it as a near-term engineering reality.
Yeah, you have to think about it mechanically. Imagine you have a data center with millions of interconnected processors, right? And running on that hardware are 50 million virtual entities. Each of these entities possesses the synthesized knowledge of every PhD, every research paper, and every textbook ever written. They are smarter than a Nobel Prize winner in any given field, and more importantly, they don't sleep.
They don't take breaks.
They don't get distracted, and they operate at 10 to 100 times the speed of human cognition.
That is just staggering. And when you have a commodity that concentrated and that powerful, the upside is almost unimaginable.
Amodei outlines the scenario he calls the compressed 21st century. He argues that this country of geniuses could compress 100 years of biological and medical progress into like 5 to 10 years.
And the really crucial part is how he explains the mechanics of that, because right now, biological research is severely bottlenecked by physical wet lab experiments.
Right, the actual physical work.
Yeah, you have to physically mix chemicals, you have to wait for cell cultures to grow, you have to run years-long clinical trials. It's just slow. Emode envisions an AI acting as a virtual biologist that can design experiments, predict protein folding natively in silicon, and invent entirely new measurement techniques. Kind of like how CRISPR or mRNA vaccines were invented, but at hyperspeed.
Exactly, doing it in a fraction of the time. He's floating the possibility of eliminating most natural infectious diseases, curing most cancers, and potentially extending the human lifespan to 150 years.
Okay, but this is where the kerosene analogy comes back with a vengeance.
Yeah, it does.
Because if a centralized cluster of servers is smart enough to cure cancer, it is inherently smart enough to cause unprecedented destruction. And Amade doesn't shy away from this in his second essay.
Not at all. He is painfully aware of it. He points out this historical truth causing mass destruction has traditionally required two things: motive and extreme technical ability.
Right.
You might have a disturbed loner with the motive to cause a catastrophic event, but that loner doesn't have a PhD in synthetic biology. They don't have access to a BSL-4 laboratory. The technical barrier is what keeps the world safe.
Right, like the Unabomber or the Chinrikyo cult. They were fundamentally limited by their own technical incompetence. But if you have an AI that acts as a country of geniuses sitting in your pocket, that barrier just drops to zero.
It vanishes.
Amade explicitly details this nightmare scenario of an AI walking an unskilled, malicious actor step by step through the creation of a targeted bioweapon. He even mentions theoretical horrors like mirror life.
Which is terrifying.
Explain mirror life, because when I read that in the sources, my jaw dropped.
Yeah, well, mirror life is an engineered organism with opposite-handed DNA. And theoretically, it could consume all natural carbon-based life on Earth because no natural immune system would even recognize it.
It's basically an unstoppable reset button for the planet.
Pretty much.
Ugh.
And it isn't just lone wolves making bioweapons that we have to worry about. The sources highlight the severe risk of powerful nation-states using this technology to permanently lock in authoritarian control.
Right, state-sponsored AI.
Imagine fully autonomous drone swarms that can identify and eliminate targets without any human oversight. Imagine AI surveillance systems that can simultaneously read, listen to, and triangulate every single public and private conversation in a country to preemptively detect dissent.
It's personalized AI propaganda tailored to the specific psychological vulnerabilities of individual citizens to brainwash them over years.
Exactly.
So I'm putting myself in the shoes of a Fortune 500 CEO or a hospital administrator reading this. If the underlying technology is this inherently dangerous, if it's capable of these catastrophic outcomes, how on earth do you convince an enterprise to plug this into their core internal systems?
Well, you do exactly what Rockefeller did. You make safety your entire market identity. Anthropic explicitly positions itself around 4 pillars: AI safety, reliability, interpretability, and steerability. They are actively choosing not to be the move fast and break things company.
They want to be the adults in the room.
They are branding themselves as the responsible, cautious adults, yes.
There's a phrase in the sources that I think perfectly captures this. Safety can be both a mission and moat.
It's a brilliant duality because on one hand, the mission is completely genuine. You read Amade's essays, and there's this palpable sense of terror about those downside risks. They desperately want to prevent an AI-assisted bioweapon, but strategically.
It's a moat.
It is an incredibly powerful market positioning tool.
Because regulated industries, banking, healthcare, defense, aerospace, they cannot afford the Wild West. They absolutely need interpretability. A global bank cannot deploy a customer service AI that might hallucinate a regulatory filing or suddenly start insulting clients.
Right. It would be a disaster.
But branding themselves as the safe option, Anthropic makes their product the only palatable choice for the organizations with the deepest pockets and the most stringent compliance requirements.
But just like Standard Oil, branding isn't enough, right? Rockefeller actually had to build the refineries to extract the naphtha.
He had to do the work.
Exactly. Anthropic actually has to engineer the safety into the neural network. And this brings us to the mechanics of how they do it. It's not just a marketing slogan. It's a completely different approach to training the model, primarily through something called constitutional AI.
Wait, let me stop you there. You're telling me they can just write a constitution, like a piece of paper, and teach complex math to be ethical? How is that physically possible?
It's a fascinating mechanism, honestly. So traditionally, companies use something called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF. That basically means thousands of human workers would chat with the AI, and every time the AI said something toxic or helpful, the human would give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
It's basically playing whack-a-mole with bad behavior.
Exactly. Which sounds completely impossible to scale if the AI is getting 100 times smarter than the humans training it right.
Right. How can a human correct something they don't even understand?
So Anthropic developed constitutional AI, which heavily utilizes reinforcement learning from AI feedback.
Wait, the AI trains itself.
Basically, yeah. Instead of relying on humans clicking buttons, they give the model a foundational document, a constitution. And this document draws on things like the UN Declaration of Human Rights, non-Western philosophical traditions, and strict rules against assisting in illegal acts.
Okay.
During the training phase, the AI generates a response, and then a separate AI process critiques that response against the Constitution, forces a revision, and trains the underlying model on the revised, safer output.
That's wild.
You are essentially giving the math a structural character archetype of an ethical entity and forcing it to internalize those values at the algorithmic level.
And they don't stop there. The sources also detail their work in mechanistic interpretability, which, sounds like a corporate buzzword, but it's actually about opening up the black box, right?
Yes, very much so. Amodei compares traditional AI to a clockwork watch where you can only look at the hands. The watch might be ticking perfectly normally on the outside, but you have absolutely no idea if a gear inside is slowly fracturing.
You can't see the mechanism.
Right. So mechanistic interpretability is the process of taking the back off the watch. Researchers literally isolate specific mathematical pathways, groups of numbers within the neural network's billions of parameters, to understand exactly why the AI is making a specific decision.
Wow.
They use techniques like dictionary learning to map out what they call features. They can point to a specific cluster of activations and say, this is the concept of deception, or this is the concept of power seeking.
So they can catch rogue behavior in the gears before it ever translates into a dangerous output.
Precisely.
And the sources mentioned they also use something called hard classifiers.
Yeah, think of hard classifiers as automated software tripwires operating on top of the main model. If a user asks a question about synthesizing a virus, these classifiers instantly analyze the prompt and the nascent response, and if it crosses a threshold, the system just hard blocks it. It shuts it down.
But there has to be a cost to all this caution, isn't there?
Oh, a massive one. Anthropic openly admits that running these classifiers and interpretability checks increases their inference costs, which is the compute power required to actually run the model for a user by up to 5%.
5%.
Yeah. And in the hyperscaled world of AI, 5% is an astronomical hit to your profit margins.
That's huge.
But they view it as essential. They are actively choosing to penalize their own raw performance and profit to maintain the structural integrity of their safety mode.
Okay, so they have the refined, safe product. The naphtha has been removed. But if you want to sell this safe commodity to the entire global economy, you need unprecedented physical infrastructure to deliver it.
Yes. You need pipelines.
And this leads us to what is arguably the most staggering part of our source material, the compute crisis.
The infrastructure shock. This is the moment where the abstract digital world of algorithms violently slams into the physical realities of planet Earth.
At a developer conference in San Francisco, CEO Dario Anode made an admission that frankly blew my mind. He said Anthropic looked at their forecasts and tried to plan for 10 times growth.
Which is huge.
Right, that's already hypergrowth by any normal Silicon Valley standard. But revenue and usage didn't grow 10 times. In the first quarter, on an annualized basis, revenue and usage exploded roughly 80-fold.
An 80-fold increase. It's hard to even wrap your head around.
Amodei explicitly stated this growth was just crazy and completely too hard to handle. It wasn't just a revenue win, it was an existential infrastructure crisis.
Right. It created severe difficulties with their compute capacity. It led to system strain, reliability issues, and severe performance bottlenecks during peak hours. When your demand outstrips your physical capacity to process the math, your entire business model just bottlenecks.
It's a really stark reminder that the cloud isn't actually in the sky. The cloud is heavy.
Incredibly heavy. We use the word cloud to abstract away the reality, but AI infrastructure is made of concrete. It is made of hundreds of acres of land. It is made of industrial liquid cooling systems, massive electrical transformers, thousands of miles of subterranean fiber optic cables, and millions of silicon GPUs that run hotter than a stovetop.
We have a line in our notes that sums this up perfectly, and I want you to remember this. The new oil barrel is GPU. The new pipeline is the data center. The new refinery is the AI model.
It's exactly right.
And if we look at the lengths Anthropic is going to in order to build these pipelines, the scale is genuinely terrifying. Let's look at the compute deals they are signing.
The sources outline a scramble for physical power that is just unprecedented in corporate history. First, there's the SpaceX deal. Anthropic signed an agreement to utilize all the available compute capacity at SpaceX's Colossus One data center in Memphis, Tennessee.
I have to pause on this because the irony here is unbelievable.
It really is.
SpaceX is owned by Elon Musk. Elon Musk also owns xAI, now operating as SpaceX AI, which is a direct, bitter competitor to Anthropic. So Anthropic's infrastructure shortage is so severe and they're so desperate for GPUs that they are literally buying compute power out of the data center of their biggest rival just to keep the lights on.
It highlights the absolute desperation of the bottleneck. The Colossus One deal gives them access to more than 300 megawatts of new capacity, which translates to over 220,000 NVIDIA GPUs coming online within a single month.
Let's talk about megawatts and gigawatts, because the numbers get so big they lose all meaning. What does 300 megawatts actually look like?
So 300 megawatts is roughly the power draw of 200,000 average American homes.
Wow.
Yeah. That is a mid-sized city's worth of electricity being routed into a single building in Memphis just to run math equations.
That's insane.
But that is just a stopgap. Anthropic has also secured an agreement with Amazon for up to 5 gigawatts of capacity, including nearly 1 gigawatt by the end of 2026, and a separate 5 gigawatt agreement with Google and Broadcom starting in 2027.
5 gigawatts. I looked this up for context. The Hoover Dam generates about 2 gigawatts of power at maximum capacity.
Right.
Anthropic is signing deals that require 2.5 Hoover Dams worth of electricity. A 5 gigawatt power draw is the equivalent of running a major metropolitan area like Los Angeles. The sheer physics of routing that much power through copper wires, stepping it down through transformers, and cooling the silicon so it doesn't melt into slag, it's an engineering feat that rivals the Apollo program.
And the capital required to build this is astronomical. The sources also mention a $30 billion strategic partnership involving Microsoft and NVIDIA for Azure capacity, and a massive $50 billion investment in American AI infrastructure with a company called FluidStack.
$50 billion.
Yeah. In the 1800s, Rockefeller didn't become a titan just by owning the oil. He became a titan because he aggressively consolidated the railroads, the tank cars, and the physical pipelines. Today, if you don't have the GPUs, the liquid cooling, and the 5 gigawatt nuclear power contracts, you cannot serve the enterprise market, period. The infrastructure is the competitive moat.
Okay, so they are spending billions to secure the power of small nations to run these data centers. They build the ultimate modern refinery. But how do they actually get the oil, the AI, into the workflows of regular businesses? Because Standard Oil used horse-drawn wagons. What is Anthropic's distribution mechanism?
The delivery mechanism is the API, the application programming interface. It's the digital pipe that allows another company's software to connect directly to Anthropic's models.
Okay.
But to get companies to actually install those pipes, Anthropic uses a very specific entry point, the developer beachhead. Specifically, a tool mentioned in the source is called Claude Code.
Why target software developers first? I mean, why not target CEOs or marketing departments?
Because software engineers are the architects of the modern economy's nervous system. Amodei noted that developers are always the fastest to adopt new technology, and their adoption patterns actually foreshadow how the entire broader economy will eventually be transformed.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because it's the classic shadow IT phenomenon. I've seen this happen in real time in companies.
Yeah, let's break down how that mechanism actually works in a corporate environment. Imagine a mid-level software engineer tasked with migrating a legacy database. Historically, that might take a week of just tedious, mind-numbing coding.
Right.
But this engineer discovers Claude Code, they plug it into their terminal, and the AI writes the boilerplate code, debugs the environment, and manages the cloud deployment in a single afternoon.
The engineer doesn't ask permission from the CIO.
No, of course not.
They don't wait for a corporate mandate. They just use the tool because it makes them drastically faster and their life incredibly easier.
Exactly. The adoption is entirely bottom-up. First, the individual developer becomes dependent on it. Then they share it with their team. Slowly, the actual internal workflows of the company change to accommodate the speed of this new tool.
It seeps into everything.
Right. Eventually, management realizes what is happening, and rather than fighting it, they formalize it. The enterprise integrates the AI via API into its core systems, its code base, its security protocols, its customer service pipelines.
And that is the final stage. Total organizational dependence. The AI transitions from being a neat piece of software to being the foundational infrastructure running the company. If the API goes down, the company literally stops functioning.
Which perfectly explains a very specific viral chart mentioned in our sources. It's a chart showing Anthropic's annualized revenue plotted as a percentage of global GDP.
Oh, I've seen this chart.
And the curve on this chart is rising so sharply it practically looks like a vertical wall.
Now, we need to be incredibly clear about this because charts like this can be heavily misinterpreted. That chart is not a literal prophecy. It is not an official prediction that Anthropic is destined to absorb 100% of all economic activity on Earth. Let's make that absolutely clear.
Precisely. It is an illustrative signal. The point of the chart isn't the final destination, it's the velocity of the trajectory. Software as a service doesn't grow like that.
Yeah.
Only foundational infrastructure grows like that. It mirrors the historical adoption curves of electrification or the internet itself. If AI is being embedded into coding, legal research, financial modeling, procurement, and healthcare diagnostics all at the exact same time, then the trusted provider of that intelligence ceases to be a vendor. They become a systemic macroeconomic necessity.
And when a company becomes a systemic necessity, the financial markets tend to lose their collective minds. Let's look at how Wall Street and the broader capital markets are pricing this unprecedented phenomenon. Let's start with the official numbers just to ground ourselves.
Right. So in February 2026, Anthropic announced a $30 billion Series G funding round.
That's a huge round.
Yeah. A Series G is a very late-stage venture capital round, implying the company is incredibly mature but still requiring massive capital for this infrastructure build-out. This round put the company's official post-money valuation at $380 billion.
And for those unfamiliar with the term, post-money valuation simply means the total value of the company immediately after that new $30 billion of cash was deposited into their bank accounts.
Right.
At $380 billion, they are officially among the most valuable private companies in human history. And our sources note that CNBC even reported on earlier fundraising discussions that floated valuations around $900 billion.
But then there is the whisper number, the figure that has been tearing through financial media and making venture capitalists sweat.
The $1.2 trillion figure we mentioned at the start.
Yes. But we have to be meticulous here and explain the financial mechanics of where this number comes from. A viral market post from the Kobisi letter claimed Anthropic's implied pre-IPO valuation had surged to $1.2 trillion. But again, this is not a number Anthropic announced. It is derived from on-chain pre-IPO trading data.
Let's unpack that jargon for everyone. What does that actually mean in practice?
So in the private markets, before a company goes public via an IPO, early employees or early investors sometimes want to sell their shares, right?
They want to cash out.
Exactly. Because these shares aren't on the public stock market, they are often bundled into legal entities called RBVs, or special purpose vehicles. An SPV is basically a shell company created for one single reason: to hold a block of private Anthropic shares.
Okay, so you have this shell company holding the shares. Where does the on-chain part come in?
Decentralized crypto platforms like the Jupiter Exchange mentioned in the sources take these SPVs and essentially tokenize them. They create digital tokens that are backed one-to-one by the exposure to those private shares.
Okay, I follow.
Traders all over the world can then buy and sell these tokens. By looking at the price traders are willing to pay for these tokens in real time, financial analysts can reverse engineer an implied total valuation for the company.
So we should be explicitly clear once again that $1.2 trillion number isn't official. No one at Anthropic signed a term sheet at a $1.2 trillion valuation. It is entirely a market signal, an implied proxy based on speculative secondary trading.
Absolutely correct. It is a derivative bet. But as a signal, it is profoundly important. You have to ask yourself, why would the speculative market price a private company that literally didn't exist a decade ago at $1.2 trillion?
Because they aren't pricing a company that makes a chatbot. They're pricing the operating layer of the economy. They're pricing the toll booth to the future of cognitive labor.
Exactly. If AI becomes infrastructure, the trusted provider becomes a gatekeeper to global productivity. Amode himself laid out the math in his essays. If a country of geniuses generates a massive leap in global productivity, and an AI company supplies that cognitive labor for a fraction of the cost of human employees, the economic capture is just staggering.
Astronomical.
Even if a company only captures 25% of that market, they would be
Wow.
generating trillions in revenue. The decentralized markets are looking at the 80x growth, looking at the 5 gigawatt power contracts, looking at the developer adoption, and they are trying to front run the creation of a new industrial paradigm.
But history tells us a very clear story about what happens when a single corporate entity builds the essential infrastructure of a new era. They become a target. The story of Standard Oil isn't just a story about brilliant branding and logistics. It is the defining story of antitrust law.
Which brings us to the competition, the regulatory reality, and the geopolitics of infrastructure. First, we must acknowledge the market reality. Anthropic is not operating in a vacuum. They are fighting an absolute scorched earth war for market share.
Right? They are not alone. They are up against OpenAI, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon. You have the open source community releasing incredibly powerful free models. You have sovereign AI projects backed by the massive treasuries of nation states. You have highly specialized vertical AI tools built for specific industries like law or medicine. And of course, xAI, even as Anthropic rents their servers. By definition, Anthropic is not currently a monopoly.
No, they are not. But the 1911 Supreme Court breakup of Standard Oil teaches us a vital lesson about how monopolies actually form. A monopoly rarely starts with a cartoon villain trying to dominate the world. It usually starts with a desperately needed solution to a chaotic problem. Standard Oil brought efficiency, safety, and order to a fragmented, dangerous market.
But over time, that efficiency hardened into an inescapable gatekeeper.
Precisely. Standard Oil leveraged their trust, their branding, and most importantly, their physical infrastructure, the railroads and pipelines, to squeeze out competitors. The very forces that made them efficient eventually made them an unreasonable restraint of trade in the eyes of the law.
That makes total sense.
If Anthropic successfully builds this massive physical pipeline of 5 gigawatt data centers and becomes the default trusted API for the global enterprise, the gravity of that scale naturally invites government intervention.
And we are already seeing the first major cracks in that relationship, not over antitrust, but over national security. In March 2026, the sources confirm a highly significant event. Anthropic received a letter declaring them a supply chain risk by the U.S. Pentagon, essentially blacklisting them from certain military contracts. Anthropic, for their part, has stated they will aggressively challenge this action in court.
We have to look at this impartially, simply as a mechanical geopolitical event. We aren't taking sides here, but the implications are fascinating.
I'm stuck on a massive paradox here. If Anthropic's entire brand identity is safety, if they are the company pioneering constitutional AI, running mechanistic interpretability, and deliberately slowing down their models with hard classifiers to block bioweapons, how on earth does the U.S. military look at them and say, you are a supply chain risk? Does that prove the safe AI brand is vulnerable? Or does it just show how incredibly complex the geopolitics of AI have become?
It proves that when intelligence becomes national infrastructure, the definition of safety becomes highly fragmented and politicized.
Well, that's a great point.
To an enterprise bank, safety means the AI won't leak customer data or hallucinate a financial model. But to the Pentagon, safety is about data sovereignty, supply chain integrity, and geopolitical competition. The military doesn't just care if the model's constitution is polite. They care fundamentally about where the servers are physically located, who has access to the API logs, and what foreign entities might be utilizing that exact same infrastructure.
It's the ultimate clash of paradigms.
Yeah.
You have a corporate entity trying to be the most responsible, ethical actor possible, colliding head-on with the ultimate authority on national defense, which operates on an entirely different set of risk metrics.
Exactly. And as Amodei pointed out in his essays, democratic governments absolutely need AI to maintain a strategic advantage against autocratic adversaries. But those same governments are deeply fundamentally suspicious of allowing a single private corporation to concentrate that much power.
The Pentagon scuffle is just a symptom of a much larger structural friction.
It is. The nation-state is struggling to regulate and control a technology that is evolving and scaling physically faster than the bureaucratic state can even comprehend.
It just proves that when intelligence transitions from an experimental software product into foundational infrastructure, everyone from Wall Street traders to four-star generals wants to control the pipeline.
Which leads us to synthesize the broader lesson of this entire deep dive. Whether you are an investor trying to navigate these massive valuations, an executive trying to decide which API to integrate, a software engineer using Claude Code, or a government regulator, the historical pattern remains unbroken.
The company that organizes chaos can become the company that defines the market.
Exactly.
We started this journey knee-deep in the mud of the 1860s oil boom, watching horse-drawn wagons haul exploding barrels of kerosene. And we ended up in hyperscale liquid-cooled data centers, drawing 5 gigawatts of nuclear power to simulate human cognition.
Standard Oil brought order, consistency, and pricing power to a fragmented energy market. Anthropic is attempting to do the exact same thing for the intelligence market.
The modern monopoly may not look like an oil empire.
Yeah.
It may look API.
Standard, then.
Safety now.
Oil had pipelines, AI has compute.
Standard Oil told the world, trust us with energy. Anthropic is telling the world, trust us with intelligence.
And as we watch this new, invisible infrastructure be laid down across the globe, we have to consider a final, deeply structural question. And I want you, the listener, to really mull this over. If we are truly entering an era where biological breakthroughs, economic productivity, and military capabilities are all bottlenecked by access to artificial intelligence, what happens to human agency when the ultimate arbiter of what is safe is a single corporate infrastructure?
It's a heavy question.
If one underlying AI model embedded in the workflows of thousands of companies quietly decides the boundaries of acceptable code, acceptable medical research, and acceptable strategic thought, who is actually steering the future, that is a profound question to leave on. We spend so much time marveling at the magic of the technology that we forget to look at the pipes. As we transition fully into the intelligence age, we are building our civilization on an invisible foundation.
The cables are made of code, the foundation is made of centralized compute, and the only thing holding it all together is the corporate promise of safety. So what does this all mean for you? Next time you use an AI tool, look past the chat window and ask yourself, are you just using a helpful product, or are you actively plugging yourself into the new pipeline? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.